in the bylaws, and then state that the chair appoints the chairs of the subcommittees. Additionally, the language regarding participation, second paragraph, and really quorum, we need to make sure that our language is consistent, i.e. members versus their weights. The voting part I think is okay, but with participation, is it no more than one half of the members, i.e. 8 out of 16, or is it no more than one half of the members' weights, i.e. could 7 members with the weight of 8.05 participate? Okay, so um, there's a lot there to kind of absorb. So, based on what we just read there, um, I hope it all made sense. I will do my best to address any questions anybody has, but just want to get your guys' insights on this member's feedback. Lauren?
I mean, I think it's great, but I think the first 4 paragraphs are about subcommittees that we said we weren't necessarily going to keep discussing. So I think that's all great stuff. And when subcommittees are figured out where and how they're being discussed, then we can, then whoever, the whole school committee or whatever, can go over that. That's all.
No, thank you. And Deidre?
Yeah, so to that, to the quorum question, which is the 4th paragraph, right? Was that answered by Sherry by saying that no, quorum is the weighted? Didn't we just answer that question? And it does need to be clear, because obviously this person had that question too, but I'm still not clear, I guess, now that I'm reading this. But Sherry, did you say that that quorum is considered by the weight, which is their second example here? 7 members with a weight of 8.05 could participate.
That's correct.
Okay, that is correct. And where does that come from, though? Is that our decision, or is that
That's
how
a regional agreement?
That's a regional agreement decision. Okay, so it's not a conversation. It just needs to be more clear.
Yep. Correct.
And an example could be given, maybe. Maybe that would help.
Yeah, no, that's good and important, yeah, to consider. Does anybody else have anything to add for this member's comments, or to comment on this member's comments? Deidre?
Yeah, and again, to make it clear, we're not disregarding these comments, because these are great. Okay, all right.
No.
It's just, again, thinking like, we're going to take these and put these where they belong when we have that conversation about how subcommittees are going to work.
Yeah. Sorry, Scott. I don't know if you had your hand up or. Yeah.
I do not have my hand up right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry.
Yep. No. I didn't know if you were about to say something. Yeah. Okay, yeah. No worries. So no, that sounds good. So without any objection, we can go right to the next comment. Okay. So, can everybody see that? Okay. Yeah, it should be fitting, right? Okay. So how does written testimony work for public record purposes? So when I read that, I think I also wondered that, throughout the course of different committees, they do have, testimony, commentary, anything that comes like that from the public. So how would that work for how it gets recorded, I guess is the way I took that. Time limit regarding public comment. With a 20-minute public comment period, is it sufficient to have the chair manage time per speaker or set guidelines about how much time each speaker has? And then the last thing actually goes to the 2 members that made the trackable changes in the Google Doc and submitted them. So yeah, so everybody's thoughts on these, or insights? Chair Haber?
In terms of how written testimony works, it truly is just that. It's attached to the records where our minutes are kept. So if someone submits written testimony, and chooses to, then it gets attached. If they choose not to, then it doesn't, and we encourage it. In far as time limits are concerned, you know, I mean, most of you see that generally we don't have a lot of public comment unless it's a very big issue. And I think that ordinarily 20 minutes is a fine amount of time. And the chair managing the time, I think, is also reasonable, because if you have 3 people there, or if you have 15 people there, you know, gauging how much time each person can speak is I think something that needs to be done on a per meeting basis. I can't see. I don't know. I think it needs to be flexible.
No, thank you, Scott.
There are. I'm sorry. There are other times
sorry.
where we have so much going on the agenda that we truly can't extend it. So having something saying that we can, you know, we have a guideline of 20 minutes with the option to extend is reasonable, where we wouldn't want to just have an open-ended time for public comment.
So, me?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Scott. Sorry. Yep.
So I understand, Jerry, what you just said, but I'm not sure I agree with the last thing you just said. I feel like usually we don't go anywhere near 20 minutes, but whenever there's more people there than will fit in 20 minutes, that's when we run into problems, right? And I guess it's just my personal feeling is like, if people are there to talk, we kind of need to let them talk. If you shut people down, you just make them angrier. Do you know what I mean? I think it's better to let them talk. Certainly having a limit per person makes a lot of sense. You know, if there was 100 people there to talk, I don't know what we would do. We'd have to, yeah. And I guess the last thing I'll say is I learned actually at the conference this year that you don't have to have public comment at all. If there's a meeting that we have a lot of business to do, we don't have to have a public comment period on the agenda for that meeting at all. Or you could just hold it for the end of the meeting. So I don't know, just some of my thoughts. Thank you.
No, thank you. And Chair Habergen.
To Scott's point about not having to have a public comment at all, he's certainly correct. Right now, based on our bylaws, is a requirement. And just to put out there that if we do not make any limits on public comment based on our bylaws, then we would default to Robert's rules, where there is policy on public comment.
Okay, so no, that's good to know. Peter.
So, Sherry, to put you on the spot because you said it, what would be the policy for Robert's rules then? I'm trying to think of what Robert's rules says public comments has to be, if we defaulted to that too.
I'd have to look it up, Deidre, but
yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm putting you on the spot. No, but that might be. I mean, so but to what Sherry did say though is that having a 20-minute limit with the option to extend, okay, I think is the key word there. So again, like, it's 20 minutes, but then we see that there's 100 people here. It's the chair's, decision, and that's the flexibility that I think Sherry's kind of recommending too. But I'd be curious to see because one of the things that we talked about when we first started doing this is like, let's not write another document that's kind of either contradicting another document. So to kind of Lauren's first point about like, there's too many places to go to find out what really the rules are. Which rule counts more? Does Robert's rules count more than the bylaws? So like, if Robert's rules actually has a reasonable recommendation for this, then defaulting to Robert's rules might be okay. And that's kind of why, Sherry, I was kind of saying if we could find that out, maybe that would be worth something for us to consider, is not putting this in there and just having the default be what it is, if we like it. Just an idea. We lost Kamara again while I was talking. I'm gonna get a complex.
Don't take it personally, Deidre.
Seriously.
No.
Are you there?
No, I'm sorry. I heard all that,
Oh, okay,
my
because you
apologies. I was
you
actually
went off camera,
sorry.
and I'm like, oh great, I have to say it
No,
all
no,
over
no,
again. I
no.
can't.
So no, no. That's a good point. Um,
Sorry, go ahead, Kamar.
yeah, no. I think yeah. So if you guys can put together, or if you haven't put together already, I think that there's a couple of overarching themes we've all kind of realized from tonight's meeting so far. Um, I think it's definitely gonna make us more cohesive going forward, especially now that, we're a little bit more clear. Not that we weren't before, but it's amazing that um, it's easy to get lost in the weeds. Um, and they're not bad weeds. It's just that to help keep our focus, it's always nice to reel it back in to have it be efficient and productive for our purpose and our charges. Um, sorry, go ahead, Chair Haber.
Sorry, I just I think that I was misremembering that. I think Robert's rules directs to um, how many times a person can speak as a member and how long they can speak for, and not in terms of the actual public session. I think I was wrong.
Oh, okay. So it's not a direction. I think we should put something in there then, if that's not a direction. So
Yeah.
okay.
No, so
Thanks for looking that up, Sherry. Sorry, I did put you on the spot.
no, that's all right. So now, this next part. So both of the next members made those strike through slash track changes kind of style edits. Now, if I do share the screen, kind of like what we just mentioned before, it will show who they are. Um, does anybody, if I hand over control to somebody, would anybody then have the capability to bring up the draft bylaws file? So at least if I say in paragraph 2, they wanted to add a comma, for example, would that be easier, or do you guys just want me to read as best as I can what I can see off my screen, but I won't share my screen?
I don't need to hear grammar and commas and all that. I don't need to hear like little changes like that. I'd prefer to just stick with like substantive commentary kind of thing. So
I totally
I
agree.
think
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'd be happy to leave it to the chair to decide what's a substantive comment and what's grammatical. So use your judgment, Kamara.
All right. No, sounds good, guys. Yeah, so without any objection, let me open up the first one here. I'm just going to split my screen. Okay, so I'm looking right now, just going to make it a little bit easier here. So one of the, let me just take a look here. All right. So starting with the first comment, they go right to under duties of the chair, uh, something related to the breaking of the tie. So specifically, let me read the sentence they're referencing. The chair of the school committee shall be required to vote aye or nay on budgetary matters, but may abstain, refrain from voting, on the matters except to break a tie. The member said, unless required by state law or the regional agreement, I don't think we should formally set rules for the chair's votes. I also think that it should be possible for the committee to designate a spokesperson on specific matters, and this role should not be limited to the chair. Um, so go ahead, Chair Haber.
Sorry, I hate to keep interjecting, but there's just some things that are law. So it is law that the chair needs to vote on the budget, not on budgetary matters, but simply on the budget. What was the second thing, Kumara? Sorry.
They mentioned, I also think that it should be possible for the chair to designate a spokesman, or excuse me, a spokesperson on specific matters, and the role should not be limited to the chair.
The chair can designate. The chair can designate a spokesperson.
Okay.
And in terms of actually abstaining. According to our bylaws, the chair can abstain, may abstain, but according to Robert's rules, in a group of more than 12, the chair shall remain impartial and abstain. Unless there's a tie.
Well, and Deidre, actually, to very quickly address your point, so I am not sharing a screen. I'm just going to read the side comments on the side, and then to help everybody, if you guys are able on your computers to bring up the draft bylaws document, it helps provide some perspective. In areas where the track changes were made, I decided to at least read the sentence in question. Not that any of us have the draft bylaws memorized, but at least to provide some quick access context. Yeah, and actually, Scott. And Scott, you might be on mute.
I am on mute. Sorry. Just to talk about the tie thing, I feel like with the weighted voting, maybe we all overthink the weighted voting, but I feel like ties, they're still possible, but they're going to be a lot less likely. And depending on which town the chair is from, they could have like a 1.2 vote. It's actually possible that the chair could swing a vote by more than one person. Do you know what I mean? So it's like a little bit strange because you're still waiting based on if the chair is voting. I'm not saying we have to do anything. I think it'll work out 99.999% of the time, and we don't have to worry about it. But there are some cases it's going to be a little bit more weird for the chair to abstain with the weighted voting, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Chair Haber?
And if the chair is required to abstain, it would, from a town perspective, be a negative that you wouldn't want your town to be chair of the committee.
Yeah. I mean, it
because
is sort
they
of the
essentially
case.
lose their vote.
Yeah.
Sorry if I started talking, but I'll put my hand up.
No. Yeah,
Okay.
Scott, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, I do think the thing that we overthink sometimes is we have weighted voting now. It's just everyone has a one weight. So like some of the stuff that we worry about, like I'm hurting my town by being the chair, is like technically the case now if you're abstaining, right? Like, so some of these things are actually less of a change than you think. It's just we are all one, like equally, and that'll be slightly different. But a lot of stuff really isn't that different.
No, that's a good point. So moving, I'll mention their next comment. Under duties of the chair, under duties of the vice chair, there's a sentence that reads, "The office of chair and vice chair shall be for a term of 1 year." The member wrote, "Although it is desirable to have experienced people serve as the chair or vice chair, situations could arise where members with less experience can serve effectively in these positions. I would delete the 2-year requirement." And in light of that context, I may have missed the sentence before, where it does mention the 2 years. So I want to mention that. Then they asked in the next section under subcommittees, here we go, why is there a link to the document listing various subcommittees? Are these intended to be incorporated by reference? That is not appropriate. The link should be deleted. Okay, that's a fair point. I'll continue to the next one. We currently permit members to be appointed to 3 subcommittees. I see no benefit to limiting appointments to 2 subcommittees. So that came up under that section again. Then a question comes up, why was the management subcommittee deleted? It's useful to have a management subcommittee. The language regarding the management subcommittee should be reinserted to the draft. Okay. Going down, other school committee members, in addition to the subcommittee members, should be able to participate in discussion. They talk about a sentence being deleted and some contradictory language that they think are happening in the 2 sentences regarding how half of the school committee members may participate in a subcommittee meeting. And then further down, there's a couple more changes. Comments. One was in relation to the school committee secretary. Why has the role of the assistant secretary? Why has the role of the assistant secretary been deleted? At the very least, the secretary should be able to designate a person to perform the task listed here. So that's something going forward. And Chair Haber?
That's an MGL. It doesn't need to be in our bylaws.
Gotcha. I'm just going to look at the last couple here. Now, going up along with the I guess, at one point later on, they talk about the agenda, or sorry, our bylaws talk about the agenda and like a sample agenda. They have some stylistic comments they made about that. Why is the public hearing placed second on the sample agenda? It should go first. The student representative report should go before the superintendent's report. So just some style things there. And then going further down to the conducting of business, I see that the section regarding limits on the number and timing of members' opportunity to speak has been eliminated. Rather than eliminating this requirement, I would amend it to give the chair discretion to allow a member more time or opportunity to speak. Then the next thing after that, and this actually, I see that multiple members have commented on this, but go ahead, Chair Haber.
Again, if we remove it, then it just defaults to Robert's rules, which does specify how many times and how long you can speak.
Yeah. The next comment, why have the sections limiting discussion of an item to 20 minutes when the opportunity to extend discussion been deleted? Okay. This provision should be reinserted. We'll take that into account. And then in the last comment, it looks like here, yep, there's the last comment. What is the purpose of this provision? And specifically, the members referring to the motion to be reconsidered must also be identified in the request for the special meeting. And this comes under the section of special meetings. They ask, what is the purpose of this provision and why is there a requirement that 1/3 of the members must request it in writing, including someone who supported a motion that is being reconsidered? Lauren?
I think that section's important to keep in with special meetings. I think it's important for a group of members if they feel the need to be able to call a special meeting at some point.
Yeah. Okay, so then, yep. And actually, Scott?
Yeah, I think the reconsider thing is actually in Robert's Rules of Order. I could be wrong, but I think even in town meeting, to reconsider a motion after it's been passed or failed, someone needs to change their vote. The person to make the motion needs to be changing their vote. That's the only way you can reconsider something. You can't, for instance, like pass the school budget and then have all the parents leave and then have someone who was against the school budget go like reconsider. Like that's not allowed. Like, however, if one of the people that voted for it the first time wants to change their vote, you could reconsider and do that. Yeah.
No, so Chair Haber?
It seems like a lot of these things that we're talking about are covered in Robert's rules and like that. Unfortunately, none of us are parliamentarians and know Robert's rules by heart. So if they're in the bylaws so that it's clear to the committee the process of how we move forward, then maybe it's important it's all there. Again, like I said, if they're not there, then it certainly would default to Robert's rules. But if that's the case, and if we're really getting rid of all these things, I'm not opposed to getting rid of the things that are in MGL, because if MGL ever changes, then we would be against our bylaws would be against the law. But as far as the Robert's Rules things, I'm okay with keeping them in the bylaws, simply so that they're clear to the committee members, especially new members, the process we're using.
I think that makes sense, Sherry. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so with that wraps up that member's comments, and without any further objection, we can go right into the last comments, at least from the batch received in January. So this member starts out in the section on subcommittees. Regarding standing subcommittees, I would like to maintain the superintendent goals and evaluation subcommittee. This subcom would maintain an eye on the process, serve as a small group sounding board for the superintendent regarding evidence and process. Further, the subcom would organize the evaluation process and facilitate the review process. The WRSC chair would still be responsible for the final annual report. Then they say, I agree that Ed subcom and DE and inclusion subcom should be dissolved and make the work of the entire WRSC. Um, so, Dr. Riley, uh, I noticed, we haven't really given you much opportunity to speak or haven't heard much from you at all tonight. Did you have any insight before I let anybody else answer on that first?
I was enjoying not driving tonight and being in the passenger side. So, honestly, one of the things I've kind of heard tonight is people feeling like we don't want to move too fast in terms of and taking the charge to the subcommittees and looking at that. I'm open to everything. I think my big desire would be is that members feel like they can make the commitment with the number of committees we have and that they're serving their particular purpose. In terms of the committee for my own goals and evaluation, I did find it helpful this year having them as a sounding board and being able to kind of workshop with them things I was feeling. And so that was helpful. In terms of, I think the second part you talked about DEI and education subcommittee. I can see it both ways. Like I certainly wouldn't want a reduction in the number of committees and to be just those two committees. I definitely would like to bring the work of those committees forward to the full committee. Like I feel that's very important for us to do. We're trying to do that a little bit more even this year with the education subcommittee. And, like next time we meet, we're going to have Jane Daly kind of talk about the textbook plan, some other things that she had presented at the previous ed subcommittee. So I'm honestly, I don't have strong feelings. I just want them to have value for everyone. And I was nervous, honestly, when we started talking about going down to fewer members of the commitment that were required of 16 compared to eventually down to 16 from the current number. And so are you regretting that you just asked me my opinion? Was I better off in the passenger seat?
No, sorry. I was trying to unmute myself there for a minute. No, thank you. I think that was very insightful and helpful. Any other committee members want to comment or any insights on that? Deidre?
So, not to talk about subcommittees because we're not talking about subcommittees, but the statement that says that, the committee may appoint other as needed, whatever, you know what I mean, means that we can have a superintendent's goal committee that is a short-term committee just for a while he needs the beginning of the year and then re-adjourn at the end of the year. It doesn't need to be a standing committee. I think that was kind of the conversation. So, but it's part of the conversation, again, like if it's something that we need, we will add it. We're not saying we can't, it's to the commitment, I think, is what the concern was. So.
No, thank you. And so we're gonna order here real quick. We'll go Scott and then Sherry.
Super briefly, because we're not talking about subcommittees tonight, but I think I said this several months ago, and I think going down the path of asking the committees to talk about what they do and then developing a list of everything that needs to be done and then figuring out how to divide that would be a really good way to go here to figure out what subcommittees we ultimately need.
No, thank you. And then we'll go Sherry and then Brett.
And I agree with Scott. I mean, and also we have this kind of unwritten rule that subcommittees meet every month, and I certainly don't see a reason for that to have to be a rule. Superintendent goals and evaluations, maybe they meet quarterly. It doesn't need to be an every month commitment for every committee. I mean, if we keep management, it can be an as needed basis. It doesn't have to meet monthly if that's not appropriate.
No, thank you. And then Brett.
I wanted to go back to Member Scott's comment. I thought we did do a little bit of a drafting of what each subcommittee was. Didn't we do some of that work? Okay, I'm not. So we do have something or start.
Yeah, we did a little bit of it. Yeah.
And then we decided that it wasn't in our we were going off the rail a little, and we decided to set it aside because it was turning. So that's what I'm saying. It's like we had some really great ideas around it,
Yeah.
and then we decided that it was not.
I did like that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, and there
Okay.
was a draft and there was a description and all of that.
That's
So
what I thought.
you know, but we decided it wasn't going to go in here, and so we kind of stopped. So I'd love to see that, you know, come back to life later after the bylaws are settled, you know.
Yeah, very fair. Thank you for refreshing my memory.
Okay, so I almost got deeply lost in our conversation. I realized there's still just a couple more quick comments that we can include here from the member. Um, they then go on to talk about under school committee secretary. Why is the part regarding the assistant removed from the new draft? The chair shall appoint an assistant secretary to perform the routine work ordinarily done by the secretary. The assistant secretary need not be a member of the committee, if not, may be reimbursed for this work. Um, so kind of echoes the previous members edit in the exact same section. And then here they further go on to talk about reimbursements. The next comment they had um, goes right down to the conducting of business section. And forgive me, this next part is a little long, but I will read it in its entirety. Why is the following text eliminated from this section? In order to ensure the orderly and timely conduct of business at school committee meetings, the Wachusett Regional School District Committee agrees to authorize the chair or his or her designee of the committee to observe the following guidelines. For any given motion, amendment to a motion, topic of discussion, or agenda item, the chair or his or her designee shall allow any member of the community two opportunities to speak, and each individual will be given 2 minutes each time they speak on a motion, amendment, topic of discussion, or agenda item. The chair or his or her designee will use discretion in deciding whether or not to allow discussion to exceed 20 minutes on any motion, including amendments, other topics of discussion, or agenda items. The chair or his or her designee will be responsible for directing the discussions to the business at hand and will limit discussion to the relevant issues and restrict arguments, which are unnecessarily repetitive and redundant. The chair or his or her designee may extend the discussion in 2 ways. 1, by consensus of members present, or 2, by recognizing a non-debatable motion by any committee member to extend the discussion past the allotted 20 minutes. The motion should include extending the discussion for a specific and appropriate amount of time. The chair or his or her designee will abide by the majority vote of the membership. So that was the long comment under conducting business. And while we're here, this will be the final comment, and probably we'll wrap up our feedback session here. Under Section 9 in legal, they wrote, along with legal, I recommend adding a members' rights and responsibilities sections to include conflict of interest and ethics and respectful engagement. This is to be in line with MGL on conflict of interest and ethics regulations and to mandate trainings and refreshers annually. And so that's the sum of their comments. I just want to add one thing about the conflict of interest and ethics trainings and the mandating of them. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Our respective towns and their respective responsibility holders in that regard. Is there is there already an established precedent for that your town designee, whoever that ends up being, whether town hall, board of selectmen's office, or wherever, they are responsible to make sure that you as a school committee member are up to date on your trainings. Is that my understanding, or does anybody have a different understanding of that? So we'll go Brett and then Deidre.
I know I got yelled at by the Rutland town when I was late on my training, or reminded politely. I'll throw that out.
No, thank you. And then Deidre.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's the towns that require it, and I think it would be redundant for us to follow up on that or have a mechanism to follow up on that or to make sure that we follow up on that. It really is on them. But I do kind of like the idea that's suggested of other required, like other trainings, you know. I don't know what those would be, you know, but I do kind of like that thought and that idea. So.
Thank you. And Lauren?
At one of our very early meetings, we spent an entire meeting discussing a document of the behaviors of school committee members or something. It was like I feel like it was kind of a rules of engagement document that we spent a lot of time reviewing, and then that also just got kind of passed aside. But I feel like it's one of those things, again, that might be something different from the bylaws, but that does seem like a good and necessary thing to kind of add.
No, I think that's good. And Chair Haber?
Well, we also have the Code of Ethics, school committee member ethics policy. So maybe it's something that becomes part of policy.
No, I think those are all good points. So at this point, actually, Deirdre, go ahead.
Yeah, but see, this is back to like kind of what we're struggling with before, where things are kind of all over the place and nothing is really in one place and stuff like that. So that's where entertaining the idea of putting something in here. And again, back to that idea of maybe a new member orientation or something like that, where specific things could be pointed to, you know, because when I started 3 years ago, COVID, right, I really had to find stuff on my own, you know, and I really feel like, it took a long time for me to feel like I was caught up, you know, so, but again, it's a different document, you know, great ideas, but a different document.
It'd be really nice to have some kind of onboarding manual that tells you all of these things. And like, where do I look up Robert's Rules of Order? Like, not list them all, but at least give you resources.
And here are the ones that we use the most, and these are the words that you're going to see the most and stuff. And there is that that training, that 8-hour training that they send us. But I got to tell you, by the time I went to that training, again because of COVID, but that, you know, that's not fair. By the time I went to that training, I was already like 8 months in. Something like that. So I was like, oh, that would have been good to know 8 months ago. But you know, and actually, I'm sorry, to that point, not to blur it, is that I did do that training. It was very good, except as a district, some of the things they talked about didn't apply to us. Some of the things they talked about we did differently. That's where, like, we could supplement something, you know. But all good ideas.
No, and these are all excellent points. In fact, if you can all believe it, I'm actually about to share the screen back to our agenda to really come home to the next item. Let me right here, discuss plan next steps. You know, throughout the course of today's meeting, I feel like we have been doing that already. And so I'm just wondering, is there anybody that wants to take a crack at summarizing where we would like to go next? I think we have a lot of good ideas, but you know, one thing we can try for here is to make a priority task list, and then that'll help set the next couple of agendas, and then I think it'll really put us in a good spot. Okay, so I have Chair Haber, and then we'll go Lauren. So go ahead, Chair.
Can you just call me Sherry Kumara? I don't want to guide you in creating your next steps. I hope that you all will come to a decision. But it does bother me that some members of the committee would rather have it in policy than by law. And what I certainly wouldn't want to see happen is for you all to do all this work and then get to the committee level and have them say, no, we think that would be better as a policy, and then have your time have been wasted. So I would suggest, and of course it's up to you guys, that maybe you bring this to the full committee for the February meeting and just have a discussion and see which direction people want to go. I mean, unless you have a decision already. But then as you move forward, I would suggest that you take this in steps and not just bring forth a full set of bylaws. Because if you're going to bring a full set of bylaws to the floor and there's so many sections that you're going to have people trying to amend. If you bring a motion to approve the bylaws and then people start amending, you can only amend twice. And, it's going to end up back in committee somehow because someone's going to have one change that needs to be made. So I would just recommend doing it in stages and getting little pieces approved as you go.
No, thank you. That's really, really helpful and insightful. Lauren?
Yeah, basically I agree with both of the things that Sherry said. The thing I was going to say was I'd like to know if this subcommittee has a consensus on whether we think it should be bylaws or policy and how we go forward. And the next step is we go forward to the school committee and ask and basically either give them our recommendation or ask them. I just think that's an important next step to figure out what the full committee wants us to do before we move on with any work, like kind of charging through work. Not saying we can't schedule meetings, but I think we need to get that like feedback of next steps from the full committee.
That sounds good. And then Deidre?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not totally clear as to exactly what the process would be to convert this into policy and what the timeline of that is. I kind of thought that the reason why we went in this direction was that because this was faster to respond to the immediate need in May, right? But I'm just going by what I've seen and how hard it is we're just rewriting. We're not even in the subcommittees that I've been in, all we've done is like line edits on policy, and it takes, I want to say 3 months because it has to be read once and then it has to be read again. And then if there's even that tiniest change, it goes back. You know what I mean? So I'm just like thinking if we're going to do that to turn this into policy, we're talking a year. But again, I don't know. So does somebody know what that would mean? And if you could tell me what that would mean, then maybe you can change my mind to that taking too long. Lauren? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Lauren.
Yeah.
We're not used to being this formal.
I think I see what you're saying, but I think it's one of those things where I would love to see what MASC could maybe give us some guidance on with that. And I think so much of it is already written the way it is. Like it could be probably plunked into policy pretty easily, like the exact language, especially if a lot of it is kind of referring to Robert's rules and stuff like that. I think it seems like it could be a daunting process, but I feel like so much of it is in sections already and the wording is already there. We just kind of need to get the, legal to look at it and, and I don't know that we necessarily, besides maybe a few parts, have a strict timeline of May, especially if we're not doing things like significant changes of subcommittees, and significant changes of things. I don't know that we couldn't have both things at one time and be creating policy while the bylaws are still in effect. And then at some point we abolish the bylaws once the policies are done. That's just my thoughts.
No, that's a really good point. Go ahead, Deidre.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, so I can see I can see, Lauren, what you're saying about how it's like in sections and we just take like each section of policy to the committee. And that's kind of what Sherry's saying that we should do with the bylaws anyways, right? Is just get each section approved. And we talked about doing that, way at the beginning. But I think what I'm concerned about is like our policy around getting policies approved. From what I've seen, has strict guidelines to it. So am I not right there, where we have to read it twice and then it has to be motion and it has to be, and we're probably talking, I don't know, just kind of off the top of my head, there's like 10 sections. So that's 10 policies that we're creating, I don't know. I guess I'd want to like think about that a little more, like know more about that. That's what I'm saying.
No, that is a good point. That specific logic about our policies, I've heard and I've had to really consider. Sometimes I look at a policy's read dates and revise dates, and I'm a little impressed by how many decades have gone by. But that's just me personally. But you have an excellent point about, there is a policy about the policies, and or formulaic process to it. So it's actually Sherry.
As far as creating the actual policies, I do agree with Lauren that it pretty much could be chunked as it is in those sections already and kind of put in place. Deidre, to your concern about actually getting them going in a timeline of when it would need to be done, I mean, theoretically, the only thing that needs to be done is to make sure that any references to voting are considered in a weighted form. But, I mean, as far as I can tell, nothing else is directly related to a change in the regional agreement except for weighted voting. So as long as there's no references there, I think we're okay to leave it as is for now. And in terms of how long it would take to get those policies approved, yes, it's a matter of 2 meetings. And if you're guessing 10 policies, fine. If you brought all those 10 policies forward at the same time, there's nothing saying that we couldn't hold a special meeting and simply just approve the new policies to remove the bylaws, over the course of the sake of 2 months. We could have it done if need be. Not that I want to have more meetings or anything, but you get the idea.
Right in the middle of budget season. So just saying. I'm gonna raise my hand, Cora.
No, go ahead. Yeah, yep, that's fine. Yeah.
As I spoke already. Okay, so I guess what I'm wondering is that I'd kind of like to see the pros and cons kind of a thing like laid out, and I'd like to see those, and then I think that might be the best way to kind of present the idea to the school committee as kind of a pros and cons to say, look, we've gotten this feedback, we're thinking about it. Our research has found these are the pros to going to policy, these are the cons to going to policy, these are the pros to staying in bylaws, these are the cons to staying in bylaws. I mean, if we can lay that out in some way, then I think that would help discussion and conversation in school committee, because again, we've got so many people and people with varying experience with this. I have less, where other people have been around for a lot longer, so they might have stronger feelings on one way or the other, and what it would and then in the pros and cons to saying like how this would affect like a process, like what would the process be if we went one way or the other. Is that something that we could think of as the next steps? It might, I guess what I'm saying is I'm a little nervous about like making a decision today whether or not we want to bring this to school committee. I would want us to kind of think about how we want to bring to school committee, like in a separate, not tonight conversation, if that's what we want to do. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. So it has been a lot to absorb tonight, everybody, and I know we're at just outside 9 o'clock here. So That is a good. I think it lines right up to which direction are we headed to, and then to realign the focuses of the the subcommittee as it is. Um, yeah, I'm just wondering, and Chair Haber, you can chime in. I mean, sorry, Sherry, you could say, our next meeting is the February 13th meeting, right? In front of the full table.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Well,
guess,
technically, we have a special meeting coming up on Monday, but yes.
yeah, and typically at special meetings where there's probably one boutique item that we're gonna go with that
Yes, there
has to get
is.
done, right?
Correct.
So, Deidre, you have a good point. Before our February 13th meeting, what you're kind of indicating and suggesting would say for us to come together to give a pros and cons evaluations of both those things, we would have to get one potentially right before that February 13th meeting. Or we could tell the committee that we are working on one, and that would be our update. And then for the subsequent meeting after, we could come up with, an evaluation kind of system to see what do committee members think. Yeah. But go
Yeah.
ahead, Deidre.
Yeah, Kamar, to that, I think that might be the best way to do is like to give them an update and say, look, we've taken your feedback. This is what we've done. We've listened to everything. We are considering going in this direction. And then actually maybe even offering it out to folks, again, floating the idea, because it would help them with the, what's coming next is to say, we're planning on doing a presentation on the pros and cons. And if you have anything to share on that, tell us what you think the pros or cons are, and maybe we can have them write the presentation for us. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I was saying, like, doing our research, trying to find out, from other members if they have strong feelings in one area or another. But yeah,
No, definitely. And
I
so,
think that's
Sherry.
a good way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just for you guys to keep in mind, we have that February 13th meeting, and then after that we have March 6th, March 20th, April 3rd, April 27th, and that is the end of our school committee year before we have a reorg meeting. So I would love to see, the main part of the decisions done by then, because once we have our reorg meeting, we have a bunch of new members. We're starting with new feedback and, new opinions. So I would just encourage you to get it done in the next 5 meetings.
No, thank you. And Scott?
I think Sherry superseded my comment. I was mostly going to agree with Deidre, because I think we've had with legal, for instance, when we're talking about contracts, we sometimes just have a discussion to like set direction. So I think that would totally be appropriate to just discuss what people are, what direction they'd like us to go. But I definitely agree with what Sherry said. We're running out of time, and one thing we might consider is just very small changes, and then reconsider some of the other stuff next year. And I know that wastes a lot of the work we've done, but at some point we're gonna get to that's the only thing we'll be able to do in the time that we have.
No, those are all really great points. So, so I think with that, I think we have enough to kind of go forward. And as I set the agenda, we'll kind of make that as part of our focus. That brings me to just a couple last things here. I wasn't exactly at the last meeting. My apologies for that. I was not present, uh, even remotely. So I left unfinished business on the agenda. And if anybody did know of any that we haven't yet already discussed, or anything that I'm not remembering.
I did think we were going to talk about adding a clause about defining what majority meant for weighted voting, because I think if we just put something in the bylaws that defines what we mean by majority, that then carries over into every policy that we have that mentions majority, and just makes it clear that we're talking about the weighted vote majority. So I think we could add something quite short and cover us in most cases. I think I actually put something in the folder that, like, I had a couple sentences or something that I was suggesting, but we did never discuss that.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. All right. So with that, do you guys do you want me to have Randy email out some dates after our next school committee meeting, to go for our next meeting? Does that sound like a good plan? And we can see what would work and be available for everybody. Um, yeah, we can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Question though. Even though it's not on the agenda for Monday, Sherry, can we? I don't have the agenda to look up, but
No.
like, do we have a place where we can float the idea under like
No,
future business or something like that? Like,
nothing.
we can't even mention it at all. Like,
No.
as this is coming type thing.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
There's not
Alright.
even any chair's opening remarks.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because it's a special meeting. You have like no little wiggle room. Okay. All right. So we're waiting.
Well, honestly,
Yeah.
Yeah,
when I
that's
made
fine.
the agenda today for it, it is simply to hire an interim treasurer
Yeah.
and to discuss that contract. So hopefully we can get it done quickly. And I didn't add anything else to it. So hopefully we will have plenty of people who are willing to come for the short amount of time it will hopefully take.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I just was kind of looking for a way to kind of move things along a little faster than waiting for the next full meeting to float the idea. But it sounds like that's probably the best way to do it anyway. So, yep. So, Kumar, I think to your question, that I was just thinking of your question of when our next meeting would be after the next full school committee meeting, because we want to give people the opportunity to give us ideas. Or are you thinking we want to prepare for the next school committee meeting before that?
We can take a look. I actually just got Randy's email. Interestingly enough, between now and the next school committee meeting, so Monday would be the special meeting.
Right.
Tuesday would be business and finance. Diversity and equity, and anti-racism on Thursday. And then audit advisory board looks like they're having a meeting right before the full table. In the days that exist in between, that would give us, and keeping in mind, if I were to post out a meeting agenda and a meeting public notice, we're looking at next Wednesday, the 8th, as a possibility. And then we're also looking at, just looking here, we don't meet on Monday. Yeah, see, and this is what made me think of after the, I'm open to meeting on next Wednesday, February the 8th. We could get something out there in the public to post a meeting. But then what happens next week, I feel like is, there's a lot going on next week. It doesn't leave too many dates open, and then that brings us right to February 13th.
Well, no, that's what I was
So-
saying, is that I don't think we have anything to discuss between now and the next school committee meeting. If the point of the next school
Yeah.
committee is just to float the idea that we're doing this, give an update, tell where we are, float that idea,
Yeah.
and then kind of ask for a formal presentation the next school committee meeting. Not that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. No. So no, Sherry.
I mean, I think at your next meeting, you're making your pros and cons list. Is there something else you're doing in addition? I mean, it doesn't seem like that's going to take you all that long.
Well, I was asking that we could leverage people's ideas if they want to weigh in on that
Mm-hmm.
pros and
Right.
cons list before we make a formal
Yeah.
presentation.
I agree with you, but you then
Yeah,
are
but-
waiting 1 week for that, and then you're waiting another 3 weeks for the next meeting where you present it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then by the time that happens, you only have 3 meetings left.
Okay. I see.
Just
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I see.
just time is of the essence for everything these days. So.
Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the only other thing we had was we were going to look at that feedback from October to see if we missed.
That's true. Yeah, we could. Yep, that was one of the things. So we could add that for does February 8th work? We can have it be a very short meeting.
I could do that date.
Yeah, I think I can meet that day too.
I can
Yeah.
do that too.
Yeah, and we can put that. We'll get a very quick agenda out to Randy, and then we'll have it public posted, and I think that'll work, and then that'll bring us to our full meeting at 13th.
Does virtual, is this okay for everybody? Because this is a lot more convenient. Are we allowed to do this? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, no, that works. And if anybody, we can look into hybrid options, but I feel like we're subcommittee small enough that I think that works just fine. So yeah, so with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right, do I hear a second? All right, perfect. Well, so we'll go to a roll call vote. Scott,
Runstrom, yes.
Deidre,
Shapiro, yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Brett.
Yes.
All right, and chair votes yes. And thank you everybody. I know
Yeah.
we haven't met in a long time, but I thought tonight was really helpful and productive, and it's definitely helping to get us, right onto the track we need to be on to finish up. So yeah. All right, thank you everybody.
Thanks everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone. Have a
Thank
great
Good
night.
night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you, Ed. All right, thanks guys. Bye. Nice.